The paintwork, traditionally for modern cars, is not of the best quality. The metal has a thin layer and does not resist mechanical damage, scratches, chips off. However, due to the small age of most of the specimens presented on the secondary market, there should not be significant problems with the paintwork, especially for cars with double factory painting. For cars older than 6 years, from the little things you can note the presence of minor paint damage, bloating, at the points of contact between bumpers and body panels. At the moment, there are no complaints about the corrosion resistance of body panels. It is worth noting that even in places of chips, rust does not appear for a very long time. An exception may be cars restored after an accident in artisanal conditions. But on the bottom of the car, there may be certain problems, especially for cars operated in megacities. The problem areas here include the subframe, elements of the spars and brackets on the bottom covers with rust after 3-5 years of operation. In cars of the first years of production, foci of corrosion can be found at the seams and liner selections of the bottom, under the bumpers and plastic lining to protect the seals and bottom. Despite the fact that in most cases corrosion is superficial, it is not worth leaving it unattended and neglecting additional protection. Also, the weak points of the outer parts of the car include poor adaptation of the head optics to work in a harsh climate. When working in severe frost, cracks appear in the lower part of the protective cap, which over time lead to violation of the tightness of the headlight. In addition, there are problems with the ventilation system of the optics, due to which condensate collects inside the headlight, which in large quantities leads to the failure of the ignition and comfort units. The panoramic sunroof is also quite problematic. When dirt accumulates in the mechanism, the panels are skewed, which, while driving on a bumpy road, can lead to cracks in the glass. A signal about the need to clean the mechanism will be the presence of extraneous sounds, knocking, creaking, from the side of the roof. In addition, in the cold season, the hatch is prone to leaks. Among other troubles, it is worth highlighting the unreliability of chrome elements, get cloudy, rear view mirror covers, climb, molded mounts, fall apart, and exterior door handles. We are talking about keyless entry handles. The door opening angel limiters are not reliable either. When replacing, service recommend giving preference to parts from the Skoda Yeti 5L0839-249B. Quite often, the owners blame the gas tank hatch lock for jamming. The motor is metal part of the lock fail. It is worth noting that in the presence of a problem, even an emergency cable installed in the trunk does not save. The manufacturer claims to have solved the problem on cars manufactured after 2016. You can only fix the breakdown by replacing the lock, but in order to do this, you will have to break out the disposable tank filler. Due to the fact that the radiator grille has large cells, road pebbles often fly to the radiators and damage them, more often the air conditioner radiator. In order not to buy a new radiator in the future, it is better to put a grid. Initially, 4 turbocharged 2-liter engines were offered at the choice of Audi Q3 buyers. 2 TSI/TFSI gasoline AE888 families 170 and 211 horsepower and 2 TDI EA288 diesel engines 140 and 177 horsepower. After the restyling, the line of gasoline engines was not only modernized but also replenished with a 1.4-liter TSI EA211 engine 150 horsepower. I'll start, perhaps, with the most reliable engine of this model, 1.4. At different times, the CHPB, CZDA, and CZEA series were used. This unit has an aluminum cylinder block with cast iron liners, which is covered with a 16-valve head with 2 camshafts, a double thermostat in the block with a pump, a timing belt drive, belt resource 120,000 km, hydraulic lifters, and a direct fuel injection system. The CZEA series motors are equipped with the ACT system in certain engines' operating modes, thereby increasing their efficiency. The main disadvantage of this engine is increased oil consumption. This problem appears after 50,000 kilometers. Another common ailment is the jamming of the thrust of the turbine bypass valve actuator, the waste tagget. Often, the actuator rod gets stuck in the lever coming from the electric motor, and a fairly powerful electric drive breaks it or the lever. Symptoms: a decreased interaction, which is accompanied by error P334B00, mechanical failure of the boost pressure regulator. It is worth noting that the problem can manifest itself on different runs. Someone encounters it at the beginning of operation, and someone drives more than 100,000 km and does not know troubles. Of the less significant troubles, one can single out the long warm-up of some modifications in the cold season, the presence of noise and rattling during acceleration the turbocharger mechanism emits. When replacing spark plugs by an inexperienced craftsman, the ignition coils may break. Often the cause of incorrect operation of the motor is an electrician. Sometimes the pump thermostat also fails, in which the plastic case warps, after which it leaks, resource 100–150,000 kilometers. With proper and timely maintenance and care, the engine resource will be 250–300,000 kilometers. As for the 2-liter units, they are represented here in 2 generations. Until 2015, they installed the 2nd generation of the engine, after the 3rd. Of the differences between these units, it can be noted that the latter has new collecting rods, modified pistons, lightweight balancing shafts, a new cylinder head with a variable valve timing system on the intake and exhaust camshafts, an AST system, and a 2-stage AVS valve lift control system. The design of the oil pump, timing, fuel injection and cooling systems were also improved. The problem areas of the 2nd generation include oil burner, time installation after 100,000 kilometers, unreliability of balancing shafts, unstable speed, etc. As for the reliability of the 3rd generation of the unit, from the point of view of the resource, there are certain difficulties caused by the lightening of the piston group and crankshaft, but in general, these motors have become better and more reliable than EA 888/2. The main trouble of this engine includes the short service life of the timing chain. On average, it serves 140–160,000 kilometers. There are instances in which the chain can withstand up to 200,000 kilometers. After 100,000 kilometers of run, the adjustable oil pump starts to bother, oil pressure decreases. When replacing, it is better to give preference to a pump from the 2nd generation of the motor. Also, a decrease in oil pressure can be caused by excessive wear of the camshafts, their support bridge. First of all, the output appears on the intake shaft and liners. The electromagnetic valves of the phase regulator do not differ in reliability either. If they fail, a check engine error appears with the fixation of error code P0011 or P0012, P0014, P0017. Closer to 200,000 kilometers, the check valve of the oil separator of the crankcase ventilation system begins to collapse. You can also note the presence of an oil burner, however, it is not as critical here as in the previous version of the engine. The cooling system pump and smart thermostat are not famous for their reliability. They last less than 5 years, and since the engine is heavily thermally loaded, a coolant leak can lead to fatal consequences. Once every 100,000 kilometers or earlier, the turbine actuator needs to be adjusted. In diesel units, in comparison with gasoline ones, the mechanical part in terms of reliability is almost exemplary, but fuel equipment in our realities can bring a lot of trouble. First on the list are, of course, problems with injectors. Expensive unit injectors, Bosch and Siemens, are used on a 177 horsepower engine. Also, from low-quality diesel fuel, the high-pressure pump TNVD quickly surrenders, the EGR valve and the DPF filter are overgrown with dirt, fuel consumption increases, power decreases. Subject to timely and high-quality service, these engines easily cover more than 300,000 kilometers. The Audi Q3 transmission was equipped with 3 types of gearboxes: a 6-speed manual, a S-tronic DSG robotic transmission with 6 or 7 steps, and an Aisin TF60SC hydromechanical automatic transmission. The manual transmission is reliable and rarely bothers with breakdowns. The problem areas here include a weak differential and a short service life of a dual-mass flywheel, up to 200,000 kilometers. Also, do not forget about the need to periodically replace the clutch kit. The average resource is 140–160,000 kilometers. Not bad, on this model, robotic gearboxes have proven themselves. The reliability of the 6-speed robotic DQ250 largely depends on the years of manufacture, operating conditions, and quality of service. So, for example, for cars of the first years of production, this gearbox could present a lot of unpleasant surprises, even at low mileage. Later it was modernized, thanks to which its service life increased. With untimely maintenance and harsh operation, friction wear products quickly clog the hydraulic circuit with dirt. As a result, the box starts to work incorrectly. The main disadvantage here is the heat exchanger, which eventually ceases to fulfill its function. Also, the clutch and mechatronics can be attributed to the weak points of the RCP, although the latter does not break down often, but the cost of its repair is comparable to buying a contract box. With moderate loads on a run of 150–200,000 kilometers, replacement of friction clutches and the dual-mass flywheel is required. At high loads, their resource will be an order of magnitude less. In addition, there is a risk of getting into an expensive repair of the differential, bearings and couplings. The 7-speed DQ500 robot has a dual wet clutch and, in fact, is an improved version of the DQ250 transmission. Despite the fact that this box is much more reliable than its predecessor and breaks down much less often, it is demanding on the quality of service. In the absence of proper care, problems arise caused by contamination of the mechatronic solenoids with clutch wear products. You also need to carefully monitor the cleanliness of the heat exchanger, as the transmission painfully endures overheating. Some owners have encountered such a nuisance at the release of oil through the breather. As with other boxes of this type, the DQ500 may have a bearing howl or a grabbing differential. Aisin TF60SC is the most interesting option among automatic transmissions, but there are very few cars with such a transmission in the secondary market. Of the obvious shortcomings of the machine, one can only note an unsuccessful cooling system, which is why in a metropolis the box is rented closer to 200,000 kilometers. The rest of the troubles are typical for any modern automatic transmission with untimely maintenance. The solenoids are clogged with wear products of the friction lining of the torque converter. As a result, the wear of a number of clutch packs is accelerated. Also, weak points include sun gear bushings. All-wheel drive. Audi Q3 all-wheel drive is implemented using the handlex clutch, which differs depending on the year of manufacture of the car. Before restyling, the fourth generation of the clutch was installed, after the fifth. Both versions of the all-wheel drive transmission are quite reliable and have good off-road qualities. Among the shortcomings of the fourth handlex, it is worth noting its sensitivity to the quality of service. With the rare change of lubricant, the garden shaft quickly surrenders. The downside of the fifth generation of handlex is the lack of the hydraulic accumulator, which is why after 40–60,000 kilometers, the smooth operation and speed of the clutch are reduced. It is also worth noting that the quality of the filter is not the best, which is why the performance of the oil pump decreases by 60–80,000 kilometers. To extend the life of the pump, you need to change the oil in the coupling and flush the filter screens on the pump at least once every 30,000 kilometers. Despite the premium status, the Audi Q3 is endowed with the usual independent suspension mounted on some frame in front of the McPherson strut, in the back multi-link. As for the reliability of the chassis, not everything is clear here. So, for example, on cars that use large rims, 18-inch or more, and the RS version, it has more rigid silent blocks of levers than conventional modifications. Thrust and wheel bearings give up quite quickly, on average 60–80,000 kilometers. By a run of 100,000 kilometers, the rear silent blocks may crack. When replacing, it is recommended to change the lever assembly. The remaining elements of the chassis, under moderate loads, nurse 150–200,000 kilometers. On the rear axle, breakup bolts can present an unpleasant surprise. They turn sour over time. In order not to go to extremes, it is recommended to carry out their prevention at least once a year. In the steering, a rack and pinion mechanism with an electric booster is used. The mechanical part of the assembly is quite reliable and can last more than 200,000 kilometers. But the electrician can cause a lot of trouble. The wiring breaks, the connectors oxidize. The rack design has an additional gear rack with its own clamping mechanism, which after 150,000 kilometers begins to bother with extraneous sounds. To eliminate the trouble, you must contact a specialized service to replace the lubricant in it. After 5–6 years of operation, it is often necessary to replace an expensive steering wheel torque sensor. The cable breaks off. There are no significant complaints about the brake system of the car. Of the weak points here, only the capriciousness of the ABS unit can be noted, especially if left firmware was poured into it, and the unreliability of the parking brake activators. On pre-styling specimens, attention should be paid to the condition of the tube coating in the rear of the body, near the tank. Selling and electrics. Ergonomics, quality of finishing materials, and equipment of the Audi Q3 at a fairly high level. Of the minuses, it is worth highlighting the lack of space both in front and behind. The situation is aggravated by a too high landing and a low roof. Despite the good build quality, closer to 100,000 kilometers, the steering column lining and other decorative elements begin to creak. Another disadvantage is not very comfortable front seats in stock versions of the car. They have a short pillow and an unsuccessful back profile, and over the years they can begin to creak. It is also worth highlighting the excessive noise of the stove fan. It starts to buzz after 40,000 kilometers. It is eliminated with grease. Much more complaints about the electronics of the car. Most of the problems are caused by glitches in the onboard electronics, due to which sensor can work randomly, and the start-stop system, while driving in traffic jam, it turns off the engine when it stops and then refuses to start it. There may also be malfunctions in the operation of the climate control unit, heating systems, and other electronic equipment. It is worth noting that the quality of the car's electrical wiring is not the best. It breaks at the bend and its insulation collapses. Over time, the contacts of parking sensors are oxidized. Body-level sensors and electric drives, such as a gas tank hedge drive, headlight electric corrector, etc., become unusable. There are also complaints about the reliability of the trunk servo. On average, it lasts 5–7 years. Audi Q3 in terms of reliability turned out to be much more successful than the older brothers of the Q series, which makes it more attractive for second-hand purchases. When choosing, it is better to give preference to diesel modifications and restyled versions of cars with mechanics or a DQ500 robotic gearbox. At the same time, you should avoid cars with unconfirmed after-sales, service and collective farm cheap tuning. If you are the owner of this car model, please describe the problems that you had to face during the operation of the car. Perhaps it is your review that will help readers of our site when choosing a car.